Great. So hello and welcome. My name is Lori Conlon. I run a lot of different things at the OITE, the postdoc office, the career service office, all kinds of things. And today we're going to talk about jobs with the federal government, specifically the United States federal government. I imagine these jobs are pretty similar for governments around the world, but we're really today only going to talk about the United States federal government. I do have to point out, it's something that I need to tell you, that many of the jobs with the federal government are only for US citizens. And so many of the jobs I will talk about are only for citizens. There are some ways that you can get a job if you are not a citizen. We'll talk about a couple of those that exist. But for the most part, most of the jobs I'll talk about require citizenship. In fact, permanent residency isn't even enough. It's most of them will be citizenship. But again, there's a few out there that you don't have to be a citizen for, and we'll talk about those as we go through. I think when we think about agencies that hire biomedical scientists, that's what I think about. I think folks who are PhDs, MDs, those other kinds of degrees, biomedical scientists in particular, we really think probably about these first three. So the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, that's where I'm from, right? There's all kinds of jobs there, from faculty, it's a PI, it looks just like a PI at an academic institution. There's tenure and all the rest of that stuff. There's staff scientists and staff clinicians. These folks are long-term people who stay on at the NIH and provide that institutional knowledge. They're all attached to a faculty member. A biologist, all kinds of levels of people are biologists. It's usually what we call our technicians. Core facilities, we have all kinds of core facilities, from bioinformatics to cryo-EM to zebrafish, all kinds of things. And then there's the extramural side of the house, the grants administration, science policy, regulatory affairs, tech transfer, et cetera. So there's all kinds of jobs at the NIH. For folks who have biomedical degrees. And then I think the next three that most people think of, the first is the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, right? So those regulatory arms, but they also have a lot more jobs than just people who are approving drugs or devices. They have entire labs at the FDA that do basic science, very similar to a faculty person at an institution. They also do some work at the FDA on the kind of the backside, making sure that things are safe. There's also a lot of inspectors at the FDA. So folks with biomedical degrees can go over and do inspections into drug facilities or baby formula facilities and things like that. So the FDA has lots of different types of positions, as well as a whole criminal arm that will go after people who are doing naughty things in the food and drug land. The next one everybody kind of knows about is the Center for Disease Control, right? I think that's CDC, right? Again, doing a lot of the policy, the epidemiology. They've been in the news a lot, the administration, what are we going to do? But there also is a lot of labs at the CDC doing basic science, clinical science, thinking about how we're going to test for things a little bit more strategically. So there's a lot of labs at the CDC too. And then I think the last one most people think about is the National Science Foundation, or the NSF, and that is entirely grants. There is no research, physical research, that is being done at the NSF. It's entirely a grant-based agency. So when I was in graduate school and as a postdoc, this really was about the four places that I thought biomedical scientists could go to. But I want to broaden your perspective into all the different agencies that actually do hire biomedical scientists. The first one is NASA. Yes, the National Aeronautical and Space Administration has a lot of jobs. Some of them are bench-based jobs, research jobs around biology in space. Some of them is science administration. So how are we thinking about biomedical questions in space and things like that? And also grants. They give a ton of grants out for folks who are at academic institutions thinking about how space and biology kind of go together. The EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, has bench and administration and regulatory affair jobs. So things such as toxicologists, biologists, administration, science policy, regulatory affairs. The USDA does an amazing amount, both from testing our food supplies. So like say there's a outbreak of salmonella in our lettuce. The USDA is the one who has the research labs that go in and kind of test and figure out and do all the epidemiology to figure out which farm it potentially came from. They also have a very large research program out in Iowa. It's called the Agricultural Research Service. I actually have two friends from graduate school that work here at the USDA. And you know, when we were in grad school, neither one of them worked on ag-related things. One person worked on protein folding and the other person worked on infectious diseases. Well, now the person who did protein folding, he now looks at protein folding in livestock and hoof stock. Like so Creutzfeldt-Jakob, the chronic wasting disease that's in deers, he uses his research as a protein folder and then just switched it into his focus and from human to animals. Same thing with my friend who was working on human infectious diseases. She now works on pig infectious diseases because it's a huge problem, really kind of thinking about it. So it's kind of sometimes it's shifting your view of what you're already doing into something new. They also have a large policy arm and a science administration arm, as well as grants even from the USDA. The Department of Defense is next on my list. All branches, so Navy, Air Force, Army, etc., all have research arms. This is an interesting one because you can be both an officer or a civilian that works in a Department of Defense lab. So one of my best friends from graduate school, actually, he joined the Navy after we finished our graduate work. And he now is a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and he runs the drug testing facility for various places. So he's done San Diego, and he's also done, now he's in Chicago. And so he does a lot of science and thinking about science, but his background was protein folding. You can see a trend here, right? So, but he uses his science as an officer in the military. I have another friend from graduate school who joined the Army after we finished graduate school. I think he was a captain. And then he ran research facilities for the Veterans Administration, so for the VA. That's another one that's not even here on my list so much. There's a lot of research that happens. There's a whole research arm of the Department of Defense in Aberdeen, Maryland, and also in Ohio that really is looking at things that they need trained biomedical scientists for. The Department of Energy is next on my list. This is the national labs like Argonne, Lawrence Livermore, Pacific Northwest, and Oak Ridge. They all have really amazing research programs. They also do a lot of science outreach that comes out of the Department of Energy. So if you are interested in science education and science outreach, DOE has some very large programs. I'm thinking specifically of one that I know of at Lawrence Livermore. And then also science administration. So how does science go around? NOAA, so that's the Oceans and Atmosphere Administration. So they as well. And then the last two on my list, one is Public Health Service. This is actually a uniformed service. It's mostly, you'll see them at the NIH. So if you actually do work at the NIH and you see people in uniform around campus, they're probably Public Health Service. They typically get called up for national emergencies, not international emergencies that are science-based. And it is a uniformed corps. So it is similar to the military, but it is all science all the time. And the last one is FBI. I actually know two people who have gone into the FBI, both in the labs, right? So thinking about sequencing and how do we sequence things in a different way, and also agents. One last friend from graduate school who joined the FBI after we finished grad school. And he actually, again, he was an RNA folder, but he now does Medicare fraud. That's what he does for the FBI. It's really, really interesting, all the really cool jobs that exist in the federal government when most of us just think about that first list of the NIH, the FDA, the CDC. all agencies. And then I didn't even talk about the Department of State, the Department of Justice. Like there's so many other, like Department of State, you can be a scientific attaché that goes around the world and talks about science and building scientific capacity around the world. There's just so many really fun jobs. I think the next part about that, though, is that's all awesome, but where do you actually find these positions? Where are they posted? And what types of jobs are out there? So the first is definitely usajobs.gov. usajobs.gov is the end-all be-all of postings that exist for the federal government. But one of the things I've definitely noticed is that all the agencies have their own careers or job websites. So I've posted the jobs.nih.gov here, but I know FDA has something that's very, very similar. So you really should also start digging into each one of the different agencies, into their career sections of their websites, in order to really figure out if there's a job that's available to you. We're going to spend a lot of time today going through usajobs.gov and how you apply for a federal position, and we'll get to that in a couple of slides. The Public Health Service is totally on the side. They have an entirely different type of application system, so that I would recommend that if being part of a uniform corps is something that sounds really awesome to you, that you go into that. And then there's contractors. So I know that here at the NIH, we use a lot of Kelly Scientific, Lockheed Martin, Gap Solutions, Ravens. There's a lot of different contractors out there. If you are not a citizen, this is one of the few ways that you may be able to get a job within the federal government. You will not get any job off of usajobs.gov if you're not a citizen. But contractors may or may not have different types of limitations. It really depends on the clearance that you need. I did look on Indeed.com this past week when I was building the slides for this with the keyword of your favorite agency. So it could be Army, it could be NIH, it could be FDA, whatever it is. And then Indeed.com was able to kind of really help you out with sorting through some of those. So, and then there is networking, right? So networking is so very, very important. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, many of these jobs in the federal government are for citizens only. Permanent resident isn't even good enough. You have to be citizens for many of the jobs. In fact, all of the jobs in usajobs.gov. Sometimes contractors will support a visa. It just depends on the particular contractor and the jobs. I can't say yes or no. And then at the NIH and also the FDA, there is one way to get in. We'll talk about those. The federal hiring mechanisms that are out there, there's about 3 different kinds. The first is Title V, which is also known as General Schedule, or GS. These are the basic compensation system that is out there for white-collar federal jobs. They include federal benefits and federal retirement, and any Title V position will require U.S. citizenship. Okay, so you have to have citizenship for Title V jobs. Title V jobs are the kinds of positions that you will find on usajobs.gov. The next category that we can talk about today is something that I know the NIH uses and the FDA uses, but only for research support positions. So these are Title 42, also known as AD, administratively determined. So PIs at the NIH are Title 42, staff scientists, staff clinicians. At the FDA, they use this particular mechanism for staff fellow, which is equivalent to the NIH staff scientist position. So there's not a lot of these that are out there. As if you think about the federal workforce as a whole, they do have federal benefits and federal retirement, and there's not necessarily a citizenship requirement. They will sponsor visas for these, but they will only be research support positions. So you will have to be basically in grants don't use these, policy doesn't use this, anything like that. You have to be a citizen for those types of positions. The last one is contract positions. Again, we talked about that on the last slide. There's a wide range of companies that are out there that are used for various contract positions. There could be a citizenship requirement. It will depend on the contractor and it will depend on the type of job. and you are not eligible for federal benefits or federal retirement. The contract company will have likely benefits and retirement, but it's not the same as federal benefits and federal retirement. I do want to highlight real quick about some intramural research jobs. These are often those Title 42 positions that we talked about. So these are staff scientists and staff clinicians, maybe some core facilities, etc. These are not often on usajobs.gov because they are under that Title 42 administratively determined mechanism. So you're not going to find them on usajobs.gov. This website here, this hr.nih.gov website, and I'll send you guys these slides later, probably tomorrow, as well as direct emails to PIs. So you can email a PI and ask them at the NIH in particular if they have a staff scientist position open, similar to how you would find a postdoc position. Our principal investigators or faculty also do not have citizenship requirements. Because they are Title 42, we will sponsor visas for PIs and faculty. These are not on usajobs.gov. And the application procedure for a PI faculty member at the NIH looks incredibly similar. You're going to need a research plan, a diversity plan, etc. Okay? So the irp.nih.gov, this was a great website for all the different options. This one here at nih.gov. And then I wanted to highlight this trans NIH initiative called the Statman. Statman were this very famous scientific couple here at the NIH who are really into mentoring. And so we have these trans NIH faculty appointments that are built in their name, tenure track investigators. So there's some really great information at this website here, this website off the irp.nih.gov, and as well as a video of how to apply. So what are all the processes to how to apply? So you can look at that later. Someone's asked me a really good question. Does each NIH lab have only one staff scientist, or is it flexible? It depends on your boss. Most of them only have one. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio of faculty to staff scientists. So it's really, most labs have one. Some labs have more than one, like Dr. Fauci, for example, has a couple of staff scientists. It really depends on the PI, their level, and how much money they have. But for the most part, 1-to-1. All right, let's move into things that are more of the GS, the general schedule. So, and I wanted to point out how to really read these federal job announcements. So they will come off and they'll have this GS-0401-12-14 biologist. What does this all mean? So the GS portion, this first portion, means the pay plan. So this one is the general schedule. And if you are on usajobs.gov, this is the most common thing you will find there. The next, the 0401, is the job series. This is the biologist. Most of us with biomedical degrees are in the 401 series or perhaps the 601 series. You can Google all the different series that are available through OPM, so the Office of Personnel Management, I think that's what OPM is, will list all the different series. And it's just really a way to group people in the federal government. Oh, I changed this one to 1214. So this should say 1214. This is the grade at which the position can get filled. So in this particular position, this is built as a 12. So you will be no lower than a 12, but it has the ability based on how you answer the questions and your background for you to get up to a 14. As well as you can come in on this particular position as a 12 and then eventually be promoted up to a 14 without having to recompete for your own position. So that's the promotion potential. And this particular position is called a biologist, okay? So that is how you kind of look at a job announcement and look at it. We're gonna go dive deeper into a job announcement that just closed last week, but I really liked it as a way to kind of show us what's happening. One of the things on usajobs.gov is that it is really important for you to understand who can apply for various positions. So there was a position that was posted at the NIH that was for a supervisory education outreach specialist, okay? and it was posted twice. And so you're like, oh, why is it posted twice? Because only certain people can apply based on your current status, right? So it's whether it's this one is the general public or military spouses, or there's this one, okay? So let's dive into what are all these little icons and what do they mean? So if it has this, it's a career transition. It's for someone who is a federal employee who is being displaced. So their job is getting their job is going away due to restructuring or something like that. And so they get a couple of extra abilities to apply for different things. This one with the ionic columns, I think that's ionic. That's federal employees. So if you are current or former federal employee, you can apply under this particular one. I want to point out here that if you are an IRTA or a CERTA, you do not qualify for this because you are not considered a federal employee. If you are a research fellow or a clinical fellow here at the NIH, you do count for this. If you are from land or base management, if you are a Peace Corps volunteer, if you are a veteran, if you have families of overseas employees, if you are an individual with a disability, and a military spouse, or any other kind of special authority, you can apply for this top position, okay? Everybody else, so the general public, which is probably going to be 95% of the people here in my talk today, you want to make sure that you are applying for the one that has this particular icon, okay? The one that is for the public. So going back one slide, you, for the most part, all of you will be looking for this icon to apply. Okay, so who qualifies? The next thing I really wanted to kind of go through is what is this GS that you keep talking about, Lori? And here is the website that has all of this. Let's walk through. Most of you who come into federal service in the GS realm will likely come in at a 12 or above. Most postdocs I am seeing transition into positions are likely coming in as 12s or maybe 13s. There's a few agencies that bring PhDs in at an 11, but very, very few. Most places bring you in no lower than a 12. So in the grades, the GS, the general schedule, there are 15 different grades. Again, most grades you are going to come into is at about a 12. Then within the grades, there's these different steps, step 1 to step 10. This is your, as long as you're getting good reviews, this is your schedule for when you get a raise. So between step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and step 3 to step 4, every year you get a raise. And so you come in at 89,000, the next year you go to 90,000, the next year you go to 95,000, etc. Once you hit about step 4, there's a longer wait period between. I think step 4 to step 5 is 2 or 3 years. And then once you get up here to step 8 to step 10, the in-between times to go from a step 9 to a step 10 increases. I think in general, you could spend your entire career here and be 25 years, I think it is, to get from step 1 all the way to step 10. The government tends to start you at the first step, regardless. So one of the things that it says, right? So I'm going to go back a few slides. Give me just a moment. I know this is not see. This one says it's at 100. This one doesn't have it. So it used to have like 148 to the top, right? So 148, 44, and it'll say so. The salary range is 148 this to 176.3. But for the most part, the federal government will offer you a position down here. You can negotiate, and I'll talk a little bit about negotiations towards the end of the slide deck. But for the most part, step 1 is where they will offer you. When you're looking at the vacancy announcement, and we're going to talk through a couple of vacancy announcement, I really want to make sure that you're reading the announcement very, very carefully. There is stuff everywhere in the vacancy announcement, in the duties section, in the how to apply section, in the questionnaire. There's stuff all over the place. So I want to make sure that you read the announcement carefully, because that's how you're going to build your resume in order to qualify for this position. Pay very close attention to who can apply. This is that merit promotion, right? Where there was all those different icons that I said most of us don't actually qualify for versus the general public, and making sure you're applying for the correct one. They're almost often dual listed. So if you see one that looks like it's just for merit promotion for people who are inside the government already, look hard to make sure that there's not one for the general public that's co-listed. Citizenship requirements for the GS position, so things on usajobs.gov, are firm. Okay, you have to be a citizen in order to get those jobs. I really want to make sure that you pay attention to all directions. I just reapplied for my own position, and even I got nervous as I went through, making sure that I was following all these directions. And I, talk about federal jobs for a living. You should note any special qualifications or job duties and make sure that you have the references for those in your resumes, and we'll talk about resumes in a few slides. And note any required documents. They really mean it when they request transcripts, and they'll tell you that if you were educated if you have a foreign education component, maybe you did your PhD in France, you need that translated and verified. So one of the things I highly recommend to do before you start thinking about applying for our federal positions is to get all your transcripts in order. I just keep them behind me in a file cabinet because you never know when you may need them. They will sometimes take unofficial transcripts for the application, but before you start the position, you have to have official ones. So I just keep official ones in my file cabinet. So this one's a little, this is the kind of one that I wanted, right? So this was a position that was open last week for a health science administrator. Here at the NIH, the health science administrator typically is a position that's going to be a grants person. So it's probably going to be a program officer or a scientific review officer or something like that. They're called health science administrator because that's just the catch-all phrase that we use for them. It will always tell you the opening and closing dates. So this one was 10 days. Do not panic if it's only for 5 days. It used to be like if it was only open for 5 days, then they had an internal candidate. That's not true anymore. HR is trying to shorten the time that it takes for us to make decisions. And so they will decide how long a position opens. And the current protocol is 5 days. This one's pretty amazing that it's actually open for 10 days. They're usually open for much, much less. Again, this one was about $80,000 to $164,000. That's because it was a GS-12 through a GS-14. So you can come in at a 12, 13, or 14, anywhere within all of those steps, depending on your level of knowledge. This one in particular had lots of different locations. It'll tell you if it's eligible for telework, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I like this one here. The promotion potential was up to a 14. This one here is important to know what job series it is. And so this one was 601, which is general health science. You can go, these are all hyperlinked, and you can go look and see what other jobs are available in the 601 series, not just at the NIH. I think that's a cool little trick. This one is not a supervisory status, et cetera, et cetera. So it says you don't have to take a drug test, but you still have to be able to pass all of the background checks. So then under the duties tab, this one was a job announcement. So what are the duties for this specific health science administrator? And this was a co-posting. This is one of the things the NIH has been doing for program officer and scientific review officers over the past like 5-10 years, which is called a global. So it's hiring many, many, many people into these types of positions all at once. They happen 2 or 3 times a year. So one of them was just last week. So as a program officer, you're going to perform scientific and administrative review, consult with and advise grantees about the preparation of applications, develop coordinator and administrator grants, et cetera. So this is what they're looking for a program officer, and for a scientific review officer, it's coordinate and plan scientific technical reviews, utilizing your scientific knowledge and expertise to do a variety of management functions, et cetera. So the cool thing about these job announcements in the duties section of this is that this is telling you what you actually have to have in your resume. So you should be taught, you should pulling out words such as consult with, and advise, and those words should be in your resume. Develop, coordinate, and administer should be in your resume. You need to have these words almost plagiarized in some ways with proof that you can do this. A lot of times I like to say you need to pretend that each one of these is an interview question. Tell me about a time when you have performed scientific and administrative reviews, right? And so then how would you answer the question? And then that's the level of detail that you would need in your resume. Your federal resume, we're going to go through that in a little bit, is so much longer than any other resume because you should consider it an interview, your first interview, and all the details that you would give in that first interview. Once you kind of start applying for this, HR does the evaluation. So they do it on some resume matching using both the duties and what you had in there, and also these questionnaires and assessment tools. And we're going to go through one of those next. These are multiple choice questions that really kind of look at your technical abilities, and then narrative responses. Sometimes you'll have some narrative responses. I've seen them recently for some positions that you actually have to type something out. Then HR will give you best qualified, well qualified, and qualified applicants, and they'll send that off to the hiring manager. So you have to make it through HR first. One of the portions to get through HR is these questionnaires. So these are really ways for the government to understand whether you have the knowledge, the skills, and abilities in order to do this position. This is a great way. These questionnaires are the way that you guide how you build your resume. So you need to take this questionnaire and then use that to backfill how you build your resume. I do want to say that you need to answer the questions truthfully, but don't underestimate your ability. You're trying to compare yourself with the general population. So, you and my mom, how would you look compared to the general population? So many postdocs often will underrate themselves because they feel like they're still in this hierarchical system, but you really should think about it more broadly and how the general population would be able to answer the same thing. One of the things is it takes a long time to build your federal application, so make sure you give yourself enough time. There's nothing worse than trying to hit the button by midnight on the day it's due. So hopefully you have more time than that. These questions are really interesting, right? So this one is from that job announcement for the program officer / scientific review. And so you'll have analyzed the scientific merit of current and projected research programs. And then it has A, I've never done this before, or E, I am an expert. And you have to rank yourself A through E. Remember, you have to compare yourself to the general population. Then the other thing is that each one of these, however many things are on the page, are what you lift to then go into your resume. So your resume would then say, identify gaps in scientific research to understand how group 2 introns relocate to non-canonical locations, or something like that, right? You would take something from your research experience, utilizing the front half of this, and then just putting in what you did on the back half of this. You can't just lift it and put it into your resume. You have to, as well as give them proof that you can do the front half of that sentence. So let's talk a little bit about your federal resume. The top has your personal info. So your name, right? Your email address and your telephone address. That's usually just about all you need. Some people say you have to have in your home address too, but it's there someplace. You're going to then need for each specific thing to make sure you read the how to apply section. The how to apply gives you very specific things about what has to be at the title of each one of your new jobs. So for the last one that I applied for, you had to have the title of the job that you were in, the name of the employer that you worked for, the beginning and ending dates of the employment with month, date, year format. It told you exactly what format it had to be in, how many hours per week you worked, and then lots and lots of detailed description of job duties. And I'll give you a couple of examples for that in the next couple of slides. And then if you've had a federal position in the past, you have to tell them the series and the grade. So like for me, I would have to tell them I'm in the 601 series and give them I'm a GSX. You should absolutely have your education and any other relevant training. You can put all kinds of relevant coursework in here. Non-science work, volunteer experiences, awards, associations, anything. Again, your federal resume is going to be much, much, much longer than any other resume you have that you've ever put together. Some no-nos on federal resumes. We do not want to see this. We do not want a photograph. We do not want any sensitive information. So we do not need your age, your date of birth, your marital status, your religious affiliation, your social security number, unless it's specifically asked for. Do not put any of that on your resume or your cover letter. Additionally, if you have web links, such as to your LinkedIn profile or something like that, they will not access those. The government will not go through and access those. So you can have them, but don't anticipate that the government will go through and look at them. There's a lot of really good guidance out there on resume writing from NIH Jobs website that's there, and also from the USA Jobs Resource Center that are all linked. And again, I'll send you the slides tomorrow. A few notes on federal resume. Again, assume it's your first interview. So, you know, pretend that someone has framed each one of the questions and all of the duties as tell me about a time, and then how would you answer that? So use the job duties, use the questions, use anything available to guide how you build your resume. Put lots of detail in there and lots of numbers if you can have it. So instead of saying mentored postbacks, you're going to say mentored for postbacks. So as many as you can, be very specific with the numbers. Your resume will be very, very long. On average, for folks with PhDs, we're seeing 5 to 6 pages, plus then maybe your publications list. And usually about 10 to 11 point font. Don't go below 10 to 11 point. Nobody can read that. And you know, you're trying to make it easier on the hiring manager and HR. I've always uploaded my resume. I found that when I try to use the resume builder that's on usajobs.gov, it's not as easy as I want it to be. So here's some things that I put here. This was me. So this, you know, from 2002 to 2006, I was a postdoc. This is where I worked. This was my boss. And then this was lifted directly from some of the job ads that are out there. So this was the job that I applied for. So it was this front half, conduct qualitative analytical studies. That's what it asked for in the Q&A, in the questions, to understand the retrotransposition of group 2 introns. Okay, the next one was oversee data collection, analysis, interpretation of scientific reports. I wrote scientific papers, quarterly reports, presented to research group meetings and at scientific conferences. Okay, so you can kind of see the level of detail that was just for this specific job. Now I went to a non-research position, so it's very tight. There's not a lot of stuff here that I did research-wise because I don't do research anymore. It's more administration. So I really, really want to make sure that I put the words that were in the job ad and then posted it directly to it. This is just some more. That was some professional service. So this was stuff that wasn't attached to my job, but some professional service that I did. And one of the things you can tell what came from the questionnaires and the duties. So it was strategize and deliver. So there it is again. And then I told them, you know, strategized and delivered monthly professional development. Another one was developed programming to highlight career advancement and development. Okay, so there it is. And then what did I do? I coordinated a team of 6 people from around the country to collect, analyze, and present data on career advancement trends. You can see collect, analyze, and present data. It's there, as well as, where was it? I thought it, data, collect, analyze, and interpret data, right? So I'm using it in multiple places to kind of cover all my bases. Strategize and delivered, monthly things. Implemented content was another one. Coordinate subject matter experts, etc. So you can kind of see how I use some of the things I've done in my professional life to really bolster up my towards the questions and the duties that were out there. Few more things that the FDA told me, and so I'm passing on to you on resume tips. Plain language. So one of the things, especially with scientists, is we tend to use a lot of acronyms, and here at the NIH, we can say a full sentence and never use an actual word. So use plain language so that the HR people can fully understand it. Add page numbers. You absolutely can put in a list of courses and any certifications, and courses can include the number of hours that, how long it was. Please don't put in colored fonts or colored inks. It just makes it difficult for people who have colorblind issues. Everything we are looking for folks at your level is from the bachelor's level and above. No high school experience is necessary. Eventually, you may need to tell them you graduated from high school, but you don't need to put that on your resume. We highly, highly recommend bullets to make it easier for things for people to read. Paragraph form is notoriously difficult to read, and so they just give up. And everything, professional associations, honors, publications, everything should go in there. Any accomplishments. That helps you if it's listed as a 12, 13, 14, those kind of accomplishments kind of help you go into the 13 section. So once the vacancy closes, HR will screen for the eligibility, and then they will assign whether you are ranked. So best qualified, well qualified, qualified, or not qualified. HR will then send the top candidates to the managers on what's called a certificate or a cert. So some people, you'll hear people in the federal government say, did you make the cert? That's what this is. It's the certificate of best qualified, well qualified, qualified. At that point, the hiring manager will decide who to interview and will then coordinate the interview. HR steps away for a moment while the managers do that. And then when the manager makes the decision, that will be communicated through HR. So the HR will then communicate the status to the applicants. They do a good job by email, but they also give you a telephone number if you ever wanted to actually talk to someone. Again, you get referred to the hiring manager, yay! The hiring manager can elect to interview you or not. So just because HR has given your name to the hiring manager doesn't mean that the hiring manager will have to interview you. The hiring managers have all of that decision-making power. Any negotiations down the road will be with HR. You don't negotiate directly with the hiring manager, you negotiate through HR. Government negotiations are notoriously challenging. Here are some strategies. You can try to do a step. So you can do, so like maybe they've offered you a step 1, you can try for a higher step. I know when I did that after I came out of my first job, I had to find a lot of paperwork to prove why I needed to have that next higher step. And it took 3 months. You can negotiate telework. You may be able to negotiate student loan repayment. You may be able to negotiate that some of your time in the past can be counted towards your time off, your tenure clock, kind of, so to speak. You can try all of these, but the one thing I want to let you know is that government negotiations are long. They take a long time. So you'll have to make a decision on if that is worth it to you. You might be able to negotiate as well with your hiring manager that maybe you come in as a 12, but in a year or so, you'll be promoted up to the 13, et cetera. So that can help too. I want to remind you to pack your patience. Government job searches take a long time. I know at the NIH, it's about 60 to 80 days. It takes a long time. And you may not hear anything during that time. So just be patient. And you can follow up with HR at any point. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Okay, so that is kind of the talk that I have for you on federal jobs. It covered all the different agencies that hire. It covered how to read the GS table. It covered how to read usajobs.gov. It's a little bit on your resume. We talked a little bit about Title 42 mechanisms, how to find those, as well as contractors and how to find those. So now I have time for your questions. So let's open up the chat box here and see what we have. So say we want to transition into a new type of bench or animal science after our postdocs, or maybe from animal research to clinical science. How much is the federal government willing to train someone for those jobs? You know, the federal government will train. I think the harder part is making sure that you can prove to them that you have the ability to get through the application system. I think a lot of times, so my friends who moved from from, you know, basic biochemistry to agricultural-based biochemistry, they just were proving to everyone that it was the same. It was just different populations. And so that's what you're really trying to do there, is prove to them that you can already do that. Remember that federal jobs are very competitive, and so while the NIH will train you to do some things, they do want, and I'm hoping you're talking about long-term federal employment. For a postdoc, we'll train you. I'll absolutely will train you. But for long-term federal employment, you have to prove to them that you're better than everybody else in the candidate pool. The typical turnaround time from an application to the start of work. Is it about a year or faster? It's actually faster than that. I would say it's probably about 6 months from the point of which it's posted to the point of which you come in. It really will depend on how long your background check how long it takes for your background check to go through, and how fast your particular unit is going through the hiring process. I know for the job that I just applied for, it was a month before they actually offered me the position. And then back when I applied for the position initially, I applied in September, they offered me the position, and then we went through the application. They offered me the position in January, and I took the position in April. So how can you tailor the resume to closely match the job description while also submitting within days? It's a big challenge. Oh, absolutely. It takes a lot of time. I mean, I spent a week on my application that I just did. So part of it is the government really does, for the most part, have the same type of positions over and over again. So start looking at positions before you're going to need one, so that you can start building that resume early on and kind of like picking and pulling from different places. And so that can kind of help. Can US citizens telework from outside the United States? I'm not sure on that. You would have to ask HR. I'm not HR. How many cycles of these global hirings happen a year? You mentioned 2 to 3 times. You know, again, I'm not HR. I think they normally happen in May and September, but I'm not 100% sure. That's a really good question, but I think May and September is usually when I see them. And it will also depend on the year. Some years, we had a couple of years ago, we had a hiring freeze. There was no applications. It doesn't matter. So you kind of have to like keep an eye out into it. Can it make a difference if you apply for a job online and if you know someone in the agency and have them put in a good word for you? You know, it's different than in industry. It's very separated. HR, getting through the HR process and getting an interview are very, very separated. Sometimes the hiring manager can ask to see and can pull up things, but it really will depend on how well you scored. I think the difference here is if you can get through the HR process, then if people know you on the inside, it's much easier for you to get that interview. So I do think networking is still incredibly important. Your network can also help read your resumes before you submit them to make sure that you become that best qualified candidate so that you get put in front of the hiring manager. But at the NIH, it seems to be quite separated compared to other places. That's all the question you guys have? That's it. Give you just a quick more second in case anybody else has anything else. That's a really good question. How similar are NIH and NSF? You couldn't have asked for a different agency. If you would have asked me how similar are NIH and FDA or NIH and CDC, I would have said we're all super similar, super similar. The NSF is different. They're the one different one. They hire a lot of people on sabbatical. And so they'll bring in professors who are doing a sabbatical for 1 or 2 years to run grants. It is run very, very differently than any of the other agencies that are out there. So very different for that particular one that you've asked. Okay, I hope that helps. If you're eligible to apply under multiple hiring authorities, should you apply to both postings? Sure, why not? Why not? But you'll have more points if you apply to the non-public one because you have multiple authorities. So you're probably going to make it on that one, but there's no hurt. It's the same application. What's the biggest mistake applicants make on federal applications? Not putting enough detail. Not putting enough detail out of how all the awesome things that they've done and following back and forth. So they'll give a resume that's good for an industry job because it's just the highlights. It needs to be so much more specific. So there's a resource for building resumes on usajobs.gov. Is that better, or should you make your own? That is really up to you on what you want. There's usually some word limits that exist on the resume builder, and I found that it was just easier for me to make my own and upload it as a PDF, but that's totally up to you. As a hiring manager, once it finally comes to me, it doesn't matter. For me, it doesn't matter which one I get. Is there a way to help search for a federal position without having to make your own account on the usajobs.gov? I don't think so. I think that you do have to have an account on usajobs.gov, to apply. If you're going to apply for a GS, for a Title 42 position, you should be looking at all those other types of websites that we talked about early on and all the contractor type of things. But at usajobs.gov, you'll probably have to make an account. Would a previous and then AD, so a Title 42 position, count as a non-public? It would be likely, but I would really highly recommend that you would reach out to the HR that's listed for that position. There is no page limit for resumes. No page limit. How often are applicants coming from postdoc positions? Well, I think, Ross, your question is a good one. I'm assuming that you mean, so for program officer positions and scientific review. I'm not really sure what, Ross, give me a little bit more information of what type of job you're applying for, because it really influences how I answer your question. Okay, what contracting companies are there and what types of positions do they staff? This is a really hard question to answer because the NIH and I think other federal governments, other agencies use lots of different contracting firms. And at the NIH, we use 5, and then there's a whole bunch more. So I can't even say company A does this and company B does that because they all do everything. I know that Kelly Scientific, Gap Solutions, and then there's 3 more that the NIH uses. I know Lockheed Martin has a lot of things that people that position here, Ripple Effect. What's the other one that I'm thinking of? Booz Allen, etc. They all have things. So the best thing I think is looking at Indeed. I think that and typing in your favorite agency and seeing what comes up there. For a staff scientist, you absolutely will have to have a postdoc before you can be a staff scientist. You won't qualify as a staff scientist if you don't have a postdoc. All right. So are there any limitations for Title 42s applying for jobs on usajobs.gov? No, not at all. Well, you've heard some things you have to report to the ethics board, just a rumor. There is some things on there. I would read your application very, very clearly. It's not a rumor. It depends on your position. Go read the ethics. So just Google NIH ethics and applying for jobs, and it'll have some information on there. It's a good question. All right. The screening for scientific NIH jobs for the background, et cetera, well, screening depends on your level, right? We have friends who worked at the FDA that we had to talk to the FBI with. But for the most part, for scientific jobs at the NIH, it's just a low security background check. You have to tell them, where have you lived for the past 5 addresses? You have to give them names of people who know you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a low level security for most scientific NIH jobs. Not all, but for most. All right, nothing else coming in? Oh, no, there we are. Yes, type fast. The AAAS fellowship is very good. We actually are hosting the AAAS people, the head of AAAS fellowship, later on this week. So, Calandra, I recommend that you go to that. Whether it increases your chance of success in securing a position, it's a very difficult way to, the way you frame the question. I don't want you to think that you have to have a AAAS fellowship, which is for policy. You don't have to have a AAAS fellowship to get a policy job at the NIH, not at all. It does provide you, though, with experience that makes you a qualified candidate. So I can't say that it's going to, you don't have to have it, but it is lovely. I hope that helps. And again, come later on this week. We are hosting the AAAS fellowship people later on this week. She's a former fellow, Rashada. I know her. She's good people. All right, friends. I don't see anything else coming in. Last call. Going once. Going twice. Well, I enjoyed hanging out with everybody. I hope this was helpful. I hope that you learned about new places that hire biomedical scientists that you never knew about, and you enjoyed all the crazy stories from my grad school friends. For those of you who are NIH trainees, feel free to reach out. And I really enjoyed hanging out with everybody for an hour on whatever day it is. It's Tuesday. So, all right, bye.